Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Stockholm School of Economics. And my name is Pierre de Monthoux. I'm the scientific director of the Stockholm School of Economics Art Initiative, meaning that my job is to draw on aesthetic philosophy to make sure that art here does not regrediate into banal feel-good, only communication, only decoration and embellishment. What we aim at is to make art work. So we want to make art a source of knowledge to students, researchers, and we have the grand ambition to foster them to become the curators of capitalism. We have a distinguished panel that now has taken place, and in the front of them you have three objects. One is a globe. It's a German globe from the country of Kant, and it reminds us of a paradigm in the planetary aesthetics, you can say, that is based on the Earth system science, with roots in military, corporate, strategic thinking, the globe. Next to the globe, you have a book, which is a book by Bruno Latour, who is a social scientist leaning on a different paradigm developed, you can say, also in the philosophy of Howard Guillet, who is more interested in environmental activist art. Bruno Latour is a pioneer for us because he is a social scientist that has integrated art and exhibitions in his work for several years, almost 2 decades. Now, to the panel. First of all, we have Dr. Anna Enström. Welcome, a philosopher from Södertörn, whose thesis on Kantian aesthetics and the question of what kind of knowledge do you get through aesthetics was recently presented. Anna is also working on geography and Kantian geography. Next to her, you have Jakob Trollbäck, graphic designer with a track record working with major international corporations who run the New York-based design firm, the New Division, if I'm correct. Who communicates the Agenda 2030 goals, among other things. Then there is Emma Stenström, who is a legendary teacher at the Stockholm School of Economics and the motor of the mandatory bachelor program on global challenges, as well as the head of the SSC Research Center on Art, Business and Culture. And next to her and next to Jakob is Lars Strannegård, president of the SSE and author of the third object down there, the book, The Senses of Knowledge, who Lars initiated and inspires continuously the art initiative for, I think, epistemological and ethical reasons, among others. So, Lars, I first give the word to you, as you are the host and the head of this place. Please tell us a little about why do you engage so much? Because we do engage so much in art in a school. Floor is yours.
Thanks so much. Let's see. I wanted to show some imagery here. Is Johanna here somewhere? No. Do you know where you? Let's see. Maybe I can do this. Perhaps this works. No, we cannot. Laptop. Maybe if we're lucky. Luck and yes. Very good. And a warm welcome from my behalf as well. So my name is, just as Pierre said, Lars Strannegård, and I thought I would just give a really short introduction to what it is that we are doing here at SSE. Everything is okay, thanks. So I would just basically try to explain sort of the development, the latest 5 or 6 years, and I've just put a small title on this, calling it the business education in the digital age. And basically what we have been doing is to do what very many universities and business schools do, is basically to just try to rethink how we need to educate the younger generation in this world, sort of especially, you could say, driven by the digital transformation, where so many jobs are actually changing, the very essence of them are changing, or some jobs are even disappearing. So this is not something that we only read about and speak about, but it's actually something that is happening. So if we here were to educate our students in the same way as we have been doing, everything is fine. Yeah, and if we were to do that, then we would or our students would come out and not be as relevant, not be considered as relevant by employers, basically. Things like being in the finance industry, so many jobs have actually been taken over by robots and machine learning and artificial intelligence, of course. So this very fact says that we need to change the way that we actually educate. And on top of that, which is of course no news to this crowd, the very fact that basically every decision maker in the world has a higher education behind them. And just judging from the development of the planet, obviously we're not doing enough. Obviously universities are doing quite lousy jobs when it comes to this. So something really needs to be done. And if we just continue to do business as usual, it's not only going to be dangerous for the planet, but on top of that, the students that at least are graduating from here will not get the jobs that they would like to. So, and in connection to that, it's quite interesting that in many parts of the world, and especially here in Scandinavia and in Sweden in particular, education is extremely specialized very, very early. So if you're in high school, you usually specialize already when you're 14, 15 years old. So there are programs where you actually go into business and economics when you are 14 and 15. And then you have the Bologna model, which in Europe was supposed to, I mean, you know that it's okay, thank you. The Bologna model, the idea is, of course, that people are supposed to be able to change countries, and all degrees should be comparable. But what has happened is that education programs that used to be 3 years or 3.5 are now pulled out into being 5-year programs. And very often they are actually doing more of the same. So if you do it in business and economics, you start studying things and then you just specialize more and more. So it's not uncommon that you are in high school studying business and economics for 3 years, focusing on that. And then you go into a bachelor degree doing then altogether 6 years focusing on business and economics. Then you top that up with a degree in accounting, for instance, that you've been studying business and economics for 8 years. And that cannot be the best way of sort of handling the enormous sustainability challenges that are facing us. So something obviously needs to be done when it comes to that. And in the case of SSE, we have a quite special and particular funding model where we only get some 20% of our funding from the government, and we have a huge amount actually of corporate partners. So we have something like 110 different corporate partners who help us a lot in funding the place. And my job is to a great extent asking them, what type of competence and knowledge do you need from our students? And what they say is quite simple. They say, we need students who have really profound specialized knowledge. They need to know what happens, what the relationship is between a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement, or what happens when the demand and supply curves meet when they are from here. But they also, to an increasing extent, speak about their future employees who need to be much more contextually savvy, sort of understand contexts. They need to be analytical, to be creative, and then what is more and more important every year is that they're speaking about culture and values of different kinds. So students need to really understand these things, and also the communication skills and their ability to be analytical and creative. And all these things is something that if our sponsors, in a way, if they don't see that this is happening too, if this is not what we're providing the students with, well, then they are not interested in hiring them, and thereby they're not interested in sponsoring us either. So this is something that we really need to do as we see it. So that's why we have started to sort of rethink a couple of years ago as what is education basically all about? What are we, what is it for? It's obvious, of course, to some of us, but we actually landed in a philosopher who's from Sweden, from Uppsala, and he said that the one that's best prepared for the future is one who is free and alive and curious and at ease in an uncertain world. And it's sort of a poetic formulation in a way, but if you are at ease and if you feel curious in a world that is completely unknown, that is the best way of being prepared. So it's all about hope. It's all about not giving in to the world and the situation that we're in, but actually doing something about it. So that's why we have, we believe that the word free is something that captures exactly what it is that education is all about: liberation, emancipation, opening different doors in the world. So we have now formulated an educational mission for the digital world that we're living in, and it's abbreviated FREE, which stands for a fact and science-based mindset, being reflective and self-aware, being empathetic, and culturally literate, and on top of that being entrepreneurial and responsible. So this is what's driving every single program now that we're doing. So we go through basically everything that we are doing and see to what extent can we sort of increase sort of the level of freedom. So how do we do this? It's not just something we talk about, but it is something that we are actually doing. And one way is to go through every single program and see, basically it's not only about content, it's also about contextualizing the knowledge. It's about, the students getting contacts, being part of a community, and building their own confidence. And this is things that higher education gives to all students, but it's not all that common that you articulate it and start thinking about how you actually increase sort of the C content or C intensity of every single program. But that is what we're doing now. And the way that we're doing it is, for instance, achieving free and getting it as C intensive as possible. We have the Global Challenges program that Emma has been working so much with, but it's actually called Global Challenges and Contextual Studies, focusing a lot on critical thinking and scientific mindset, basically on reflection and really understanding yourself, because we think this is something that's absolutely key. We have our big initiative focusing on sustainable markets to understand all the sustainability challenges that we are facing. We have a tutorial program which is about having a much closer collaborate or interaction between professors and students, sort of the Cambridge-Oxford model, or quite close to the movie, or that's the hope at least, Dead Poets Society in a way, really sort of getting deeper learning, getting the students to understand themselves as well. And then we have the art initiative that Pierre is heading and Emma is working with a lot. And it's something, it's all about the pedagogical idea of free. So it's not about the facts, but it is about the reflection, the empathy, and the critical and analytical and creative thinking. So we use art as a very clear pedagogical model in order to reach free. And so it's got nothing to do with decoration, but it's only about the R, the E, and the E. The facts we're not all that interested in, because it's not a school of art history, but we actually use the art for pedagogical reasons of different kinds. And then we have the literary agenda, which is basically a fiction reading book circle. It's actually one of Sweden's largest book circles. And what we do with that is basically, it's a way of reaching the first E, namely empathy. If you fiction reading has this enormous potential of moving us to other worlds, to other places, and open up to basically understanding what it is like to be somebody else. So that's why we're doing that, a very sort of structured program with 7 or 8 books a year. And then we have several different types of artworks. So when you walk around here, you're going to see that the place is actually packed with artworks. And I can speak at length, just, you know, these eyes that are here, for instance. But just to give a very short example, so we use art as what is called object-based learning. So this is in our library. It is actually a money-changing table from the 16th century. And in the 16th century, if you were interested in opening up a bank or a financial institution, then you went to the authorities, and then you didn't just get a license in the form of a piece of paper, but you actually got a piece of furniture, namely in Italian a banca, which is where the word bank comes from. It's actually just a bench. And if you were not able to to pay your debts or fulfill your obligations, then the authorities came and didn't just tear your little license apart, but they were much more brutal, just cutting the entire bench in half. So the banca became ruptured, and in Italian it's banca rotta, and that's where the word bankrupt comes from. So this is sort of an illustration of what bankruptcy is all about. It's sort of it's an entrance into understanding the financial system, how it actually operates. So, you know, you can start speaking about things like the social implications of insolvency, or what the financial system is all about. This is actually a sort of dream portrait of what the West wants of Putin right now, right? That's exactly what he wants him to become, a bancarotta, right? That's what you're doing. Or works that are like this one by Clay Ketter, which is an image. It's a photo of what used to be a house, but this is what's left after the Hurricane Katrina wiped and washed the entire sort of security and house away from an entire family. So that's a way of discussing the social implications of increased extreme weather, for instance. So it's actually a way of sort of combining the sort of aesthetically communicated knowledge with the logical scientific one. It's a way it speaks to our senses. It's a way of sort of increasing the pedagogical idea and making the entire environment here much more sort of knowledge intensive. So we want the art to serve as an intellectual and emotional itching powder in order to increase learning. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Lars. So this is a great introduction to this morning when you're mentioning the role of art and the role of design, the role of communication, and the possibility of joining the logical analytical with some kind of synthetic or syntactic. You're going to speak about that maybe, I don't know, Anna. So now, Jakob, a few words about what you're doing, and when you present yourself, you're communicating the Agenda 2030 through design in your firm in New York. So how does this work? And of course, design and art, how do they overlap, and so on and so forth? Jakob, the floor is yours.
Nice to be sitting in front of your design in so many ventures in the world. So I can say that my main interest has always been
you need to
technology.
Yeah.
Now, oh. Cool. So I think that I've mostly been interested in systems in my whole life. I've been working with I was fascinated by technology, and I was building electronics and things. So to me, it started to be, I started to find systems, and when you start to be interested in systems, it's always interesting to find out what actually are systems and what are systems that we apply to occurrences to understand what's happening. There's a slight difference there, especially if you're coming from a field where you're actually constructing systems. So sometimes we use systems to understand things, and that's very similar to the design profession that's sort of where I started. Well, I started out as a DJ who needed to make design flyers to get people to the club, but it was still like a way to try to figure out how to make people understand the message. And I think early on, design and art was something that I was like, okay, they're friends, because art is really nice for inspiration, and the design is also nice for inspiration in a sense when you learn the field. What I found is that the way we think about it is that design is more of an expression of a thought, and to get a thought that is worthy of designing, we had some mottos. We had discard everything that means nothing, as a mean to try to weed out the real topics that were worth talking about. And if you do that, you kind of cast aside decorative design, because it becomes very functional, and you're striving for a functional design that is still aesthetically pleasing in a way, but everything in it should be able to be derived from something. Art, I like to think about it as, in a sense, they're opposite, right? Because in design, you have a thought, an idea that you're trying to shape in a form so it gets an emotional response, that you can take it easily to you, and that you embody the qualities of the thought in the design. Art, on the other hand, to me, is much more of a thought. No, I'm sorry, is an emotion that you want to have a thought resulting from it. So to me, art has always been, early on, I was always trying to find meaning in art. And of course, art can be very focused. Art is an enormously powerful tool for social justice or environmental issues or whatever it is. And we've seen this through history. And I think that I was a little bit confused when I saw art that I didn't know what it wanted to do. And I was desperately trying to figure out what it was and why is this piece called Untitled? Was the artist just lazy, or was this a puzzle for me? Until I just realized that, oh, this is just someone opening my mind and doing something that I have to think about. And to me, the artist's role as just an eye opener I'm sorry, I'm very jet lagged because I just landed from New York. So, but it's sort of sending out ideas, and I rarely look at design for inspiration. It's always art. It's always, painting and photography and things, because that starts my thought process in a completely different way. So to me, the design aspect is just when you finally figure out what the most essential thing is. So as with these goals, the names were just incredibly long and complex, and we just weeded them down to what was important. And then they were actually very easy to design. So people have been like, wow, that was a really great job. And it was, of course, fantastic to be able to be involved with this, but on the scale of difficult projects, this wasn't very difficult, because we had made it so clear what the goals were about. So then it's like, yeah, we can design some symbols for that. But anyway, so just to conclude this, I think that it's interesting that if you're looking at the world as a system, regardless of parts that are systems, and of course the ecological system is a system, which means that it's also an equation that we're taking part of, then to understand that we can use design thinking in the way that we're expressing it for people to understand it. But if we want to lift our eyes and look at other ways to attack our challenges, then I think that art is opening us up to think. I mean, when art is confusing, it's almost best, because that means that you have to leave the tracks that you're in before and find another way to look at it.
Thank you very much, Jakob. Yeah, we have to. Before we give the word to Anna Enström, maybe Emma, you would say a couple of words of how you slip in this kind of, how you make the art active, make art work, or try to do this in our education.
Yeah, a few concrete examples, perhaps. I teach, if I go back to what Lars said, I teach the tutorial, the reflection series, as we call it. I will, when the students come here, I will ask them very first time to walk around the school, look at the art we have everywhere, and pick a piece that they want to just introduce themselves with to the group. That could be like a very starting point. And some feel very uncomfortable because they're not used to it, and some just step into it. And often they tell me afterwards that it changes the dynamics of the class a bit. It's not always the same students that are good in math that are easily picking up a piece that they feel somehow talks to them. So that is like, I change things, and then things happen over the years we meet, but we start with art. Another example would be, some of you might have come to the panel yesterday. I work a lot with circus arts. So I teach a course at the master level, and it's a very interesting course called Global Citizenship. I teach it together with Transparency International. That is one of our social partners. And we actually do it together. And we bring in organizations, companies, and we work with real live cases around corruption and anti-corruption and human rights around the world. And the students engage in the cases. But then I also bring in the circus artists. You met one yesterday, but I work with some others from Circus Circus. And we talk about, so these students come from all over the world, but we will do, we look at the circus, we talk about how the circus works with things like failures and trust and vulnerability, as we talked about yesterday. But then we also actually practice circus. We always do embodied exercises for trust. And somehow that also opens up in a completely different way than looking at a piece of art, but actually also being part of it opens up for new discussions, connections, vulnerability too, I think. So something happens there. But I use it in all courses I teach. Other times we, like in Global Challenges that Lars was mentioning too, we can also, for example, bring the students outside school to a museum or collaborate with a lot of other institutions. Of course, we bring in novels. When I teach sustainability, I will ask my students to read Ken Stanley Robinson's The Ministry for the Future, which is a sci-fi novel or sci-fi novel. And we'll use that also as a course literature. And once again, it opens up. I think opening up is, for me, one word that's important here.
Thank you, Emma. So this is quite interesting, and I'm very happy that you could come at short notice, by the way, Anna, and it's very nice of you to bring your kids and to be here with us. And it's also fantastic to have someone specializing in the experience, erfarenhet, the experience you get, the aesthetic experience, and what kind of knowledge there is. Because I think the discussion also probably boils down to discussion, what is science? And are there several ways of doing sciences? What are your reactions to what you've heard till now, Anna? And how do you want? What are you doing? The floor is yours.
Just let me try. Is it on? Yeah, great. No, but thank you for. So bear with me now. Is it on? Or you have to have it very close. Very close.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Very close. Very close. That's my specialty. Very close. No, it was just my immediate reaction to all of your presentations. Thank you. You ending on this opening up. So sharing is also part of this. Sharing of sensibilities. No, but this the very idea that art has this educational or political active interventionist aspect to it and possibility, kind of historically, since I will position myself here as the historicist, I will take that position at least. That very idea of art's autonomy as having this possibility comes from its division from knowledge, that it's not in any sense kind of, so in the beginning, so my discipline is aesthetics, and the aesthetics was founded as a philosophical discipline kind of in the 1750, 1758 by Alexander Baumgarten, a German rationalist, where sensibility is given the primacy as a discipline of its own, as a particular form of knowledge. So that's his take. And then comes, to make it quick, then comes Kant, Immanuel Kant, in 1790 with the Critique of Judgment, where this Baumgartian idea of aesthetics being the art of thinking beautifully becomes the critique of aesthetic judgment. And then the aesthetic judgment is something simply separated them from the judgment of knowledge, the determinate judgment, where that's kind of what we could consider as our kind of normative orientation in the world, as recognizing objects as objects, being determined by concepts. Really. Okay, so hold that thought. I would just join my son to the bathroom. But anyways, to end on, I will come back to this. But so the very division between art and knowledge kind of has in where we are at now, where art has this, again, this epistemic function almost, as this is connected with the kind of that turn with the academization of artistic practices, where you have like research and knowledge becoming aesthetic categories to recognize what is art. So then it has this twist to it that's very interesting to also see how a school and education like this is operating with art as part of this knowledge making. But I will problematize this more in a second.
I think this is it's quite, of course, very interesting to hear Anna speak about the critique of judgment, because judgment is, you could say, Kant's version of decision making and even verdicts to decide whether something, what the quality of something is, and how to decide this in an aesthetic process, and that the aesthetic process, so to speak, goes into the logical process. Lars, how do you look upon, when you say science is very important? Yes, but what science?
Well, I mean, here
sciences. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at from this school's perspective, I mean, we are a completely science-based institution where we focus on, you know, management studies and finance and economics. So, and I think the scientific production model is extremely important to actually. I mean, it's a model that has been developing for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it works. You know, of course, there are flaws with it, but still it works. It works really effectively too, and it's a pretty nice sort of a knowledge management system where you get, you know, the sort of status and you know, pay rise, etc., depending on your ability to contribute to the wider scientific community, which is kind of interesting. So it's sort of an altruistic idea behind it all, because that's how you measure it. It's very different from other types of knowledge producing organizations and systems. So I think it's really good to have that, and compliments for being so good at doing things at the same time, I must say. I can just connect a bit, you know, so that's the science part, but what Anna said is, you know, what the way that we are now using art here, because that's what we are doing. Actually, we are using art, and we are, you could argue, instrumentalizing it too, but we're not instrumentalizing sort of the production of art. You know, we are using the objects, and we use them as pedagogical tools. And I don't see any. So I think that's a legitimate way of actually using it, because the objective is actually to create a better world in order to use it as an intellectual and emotional itching powder. And I think it works really well, because if you combine these two, I think what Anna was talking about is the urge to sort of categorize things as being art and sort of have some kind of checkbox in order, you know, the academization of it, where you have artistic practice, where you try to turn that into an academic discipline, which I believe is very problematic in itself. But here, I mean, you can just realize that art is communicating in another way than scientific thought is. And if you know, you can take as an example a poem. You know, you know, you can actually you can take a poem and take the content of it and present it in you know, in a PowerPoint. Basically, this is what happens in this poem. But then when it's read out in the rhythm and sort of the actual presentation of it, it's in a way the aesthetic qualities of it, then it communicates to you in another way, right? And it's in another level. So if you take the example here of the Global Challenges program, we have a lot of facts and all these hockey stick curves of what's happening to, you know, in terms of global challenges, for instance, in climate change, where the world temperature is heading. And then it's sort of something that's fact-based. And then you go out and take a look at this image right here. It sort of communicates to you in another way. And that's, you know, one way of phrasing it is that it communicates, you know, directly to your senses. And thereby it sort of, you know, it speaks to you without, you know, without taking the first, you know, it doesn't enter your cognition at first, but it comes to your senses. And then you know, through the help of teachers and pedagogics, you can actually combine these two, the logical scientific knowledge with the aesthetic knowledge, and thereby a deeper learning happens actually. So that's not a way of, you know, of course it's a reductionist way of speaking, that this is only an artwork about climate change. Of course it's not. I mean, it's a lot of things. I mean, you could look at these eyes when you were, you know, speaking about seeing. And we have chosen one interpretation of it, And that's kind of tricky when you use art in pedagogics in order to create, learning. Then you have to be really careful in order for you not to close the interpretations of the artworks too much, because then you sort of devalue the artworks in themselves. So it's all about pedagogics as I see it. That was a very long answer to a very short question.
Thank you. Jakob, I was thinking of, you have a thorough experience and you made your career in a world of corporations, and Lars was showing the partners of the school, which are they are corporations. Is the kind of way of tackling this changing in corporation? And does this mean that design, as you do it for corporations and for big organizations, is sort of slipping in the direction of art or something like that? Or what's happening with design? Because the way to get aesthetics and art into business school is to go through design thinking. But this is problematic for us. What is the situation for you when you work with these corporations?
Well, I think there's, we've had for a long time 2 words, which is beauty and logic, that I found the words maybe 50 years ago, and I was like, yeah, this is what I like. I like when things are logical, and I like when they're beautiful. And then, and I was working at that point with just combining words that had some kind of a tension in between them and sort of imbued each other with some other meaning. But in this case, it's actually something that, which you were touching on, it's like the beauty of thought also. It's like when you have a perfect expression of something, then you can find beauty in that. And I think that beauty that is true for thoughts, and it's also true for objects when they're like ultimately functional, which is things that we can see with a lot of Japanese objects, old objects, or Dieter Rams design for Braun, or like when you just see that this is the way that is like ultimately functional, and it's also pleasing to the eye. So for me, it's about finding that thing, and the area where it gets a little bit, well, very interesting, because I've lived my life with music, and I've been having conversations and thoughts about, is there something that's objectively better music than other music? Is there a better way? And of course you would say Johann Sebastian Bach, that's objectively better than anything, but maybe not everyone agrees. But if you're going to do just that thing, it comes anyway into the personal thoughts that we've been talking about. And there, I think that action, like if we're going to get action on these global challenges we have, it's got to be emotional. It's like all action has to be emotional. And then we can't do that just with design that's perfect. We need to add something to it. We need to add something that makes people think, that triggers people, and maybe upsets people or make people happy about. We need to play on that whole thing. And I'm sorry, I'm getting long, but I was just thinking about what Lars said about the poem. I mean, think about how striking it is with your favorite songs when you just read the lyrics. It's just like, yeah, really? That's like, I love you, and let's meet tomorrow. It's like, it can be so banal, but in the context of what you've done with the expression of it, it just becomes something that you just adore, and you want to fall in love, or you want to break up, or whatever it is. So to me, that's when you go into, like, from having the functional design that goes for perfection into adding the aspect of energy in form of artistic expression.
And that's, of course, very, very relevant in a setting as here, when, especially in the business communities where people have been thinking so much and become professionals, and even sort of, doing cliches of storytelling and narration, and this has become, so the poetic way of breaking through in that sense is, of course, very interesting. Anna, Lars and we here, we have the ambition, or we hope that it will be possible to combine some sort of logical, analytical thinking or science with something else. And we do these atmospheres you're going to discuss in classrooms, which are atmospheres attempt to create a milieu. Is it possible to do you think? Or is this just a utopian thinking from us? Can you combine the logical with the, in this case, the emotional and the poetic and so on?
I was just thinking about the two terms, meaning and the truth, when you were talking, what kind of also the distinction in the feeling of listening to your favorite song and then just looking at the lyrics. And just to make a simple analogy, if the lyrics would be then like the logic, the scientific results of the coming catastrophe of the earth, and then the music being the possibility to, in one way or another, just be able to feel that, not to like grasp it because it's there in the figures, in the plans, but just to actually give meaning to those figures. And I think maybe that's kind of the hinge. I also have this quote echoing because I was reading a book yesterday. It's Kant Opus Posthumum. It's his like late works that he wrote just before he died. Well, where there's this description of world, the concept world, as the hinge between ontology and physics. So ontology, that which is kind of, and then physics as representing all empirical sciences. So the world isn't, it's not an object that we can have knowledge about. It's kind of what we, the field for our possible experiences. And Kant himself brought in like geography and anthropology. He was the first actually to teach on geography in an academic setting in any in the Western world, making geography an academic discipline as well. And then the point with teaching students geography, and I think there's some similarities with this your program here, is that without any like concepts or without encountering, like placing yourself somewhere and like grasping this somewhere, or trying to being in the process of this description of what is, there's no use with doing transcendental philosophy and like trying to figure out like what. So I just see the similarities of being an institution with, of course, with the goal to exam in the, I don't know if economy is considered that you can count as empirical science in that sense, but
oh yeah,
of course, but in the Kantian sense, perhaps that it will be more metaphysics, perhaps in the current state of economy, comparing to the mercantile place where he was coming from. Yeah.
No, but I was just curious because it's always a discussion among business schools, I think, too, about the, when I was thinking about that when you were talking, the looking at art and the making of it. And we have that discussion all the time with the students. Often students will ask, oh, this is great. We look at all these, you know, whether it's performances or pieces of art on the wall or everywhere. Or it's like making it ourselves. That is always a discussion. And I was relating to that when you...
But maybe the making is taking place. I mean, I think it's about bringing in the unpredictable moment in education to make the room for reflection, in general sense that art creates a space for that. Yeah.
When you speak about this hobby, we are a little bit, I think both Anna and me, under the spell of a guy called Howard Cagill, who has claimed that we have two ways of looking at things. which is a synthetic way of putting things together into wholes and systems, and the what is it? It's a difficult word.
Synthetic. It's not syncretism. So
synthetic. I don't know. It's a very complex word anyway. So, and the other approach is to notice the lines of difference between that sort of binds different things together and not necessarily form a whole object, which would be the globe. And the other approach, maybe it's what Bruno Latour tries to do when he approaches Gaia. So, and yeah, Lars, you have something on the screen.
Yes, I decided to stand up. No, but I was just thinking about what you were saying, you know, about the relationship between science and aesthetics, and also sort of, you know, the role of metaphysics versus the empirical. And just to give you a very short example of what we've been doing the latest academic year here, is a project together with an artist called Jakob Dahlgren, and he is working with abstract art. So this is an image where he stands outside the main building with two of his flags being two abstractions. So that the title of the entire project has been abstractions, basically, and what is the role of abstractions. And he has actually designed an entire room so it's an art classroom that's upstairs here. And what he does is that he works with both, basically two things: school material and measurement tools. So he doesn't paint or anything, but he actually uses three-dimensional objects like here, pens, rulers, different types of measurement tools. And here he's sitting in the final, or in the room. So the stripes up there, they are made out of pencils, and then you have up in the left-hand corner, you have the other pens, and you have measurement tapes or tools for the rest of it. So in this room, we have been discussing sort of the very concept of measurements. You know, what is the idea of you know, what's happening in this in this world where that is becoming completely quantified. You know, so much it's discussed in very many different ways. Joanna Bornemark, who was to be here, has written about that. I edited a book a long time ago called or basically on what's being measured and not. And what we're doing here is basically try to measure the world in every single sense. I mean, just take a balance sheet or a profit and loss statement. It's all about measurements. So this is a way of actually discussing measurements and sort of the practice of science. Oh, she left. And also what we combine that with when you were asking what the students were then doing. Are they just being exposed to the art, or are they going in to sort of the Aristotle technique way of producing knowledge? So what we did was that Jakob Dahlgren came, you know, we took the students to his room, to the Jakob Dahlgren room, and then what they were to do was to take some memory or some idea or something that they then turned into an abstraction. So, you know, some of them came with like the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Some came with you know, memories from their childhood, and then they turned that into abstractions. You know, by basically cutting and you know, and gluing things all together, so they came up with an abstract image, and then that was transformed into a textile object, namely a flag, which was then exposed, as you see there down in the big atrium all over. So the atrium was just full of flags, and that made it possible for us to discuss things like authenticity and global production systems, because, you know, they were asked. You know, in global production, where does value actually occur? If you take a sneaker like this, where's, you know, this can be sold for, I don't know how much, Emma, it's probably very expensive. But, you know, where does value actually come about that? Well, somebody says it's the designer, of course, and then, you know, they get like 80% of the value in it, because it comes from this sort of creative work in it. And so the students were asked, so these flags that are now hanging in here, who's actually created the value? And some of the students were like, it's of course me, I'm the great designer behind this. And then somebody else said, well, look, they look very similar, you know, in shape and color, etc. So perhaps, you know, this artist has actually used me, a student, as as the tool for making the art instead. So then they were just considered to, oh my God, I've just been an idiot who's been creating value for this guy who could probably sell these artworks as a limited edition. So this was a way of starting with measurement, with quantification of society, speaking about abstractions, understanding abstract thinking, discussing things like value creation and what happens in the world of global production. So this is an example of how you sort of combine the scientific knowledge with the emotional one, engaging the students and sort of studying all these different types, or getting all these different type of knowledge forms at the same time. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Lars. Again, I mean, traditionally, I think even from the Kantian point of view, there are no distinct lines between the emotional, the aesthetic, and the logical and the material. So it's always fleeting. You could sort of combine. So the art is probably to open up these windows between. Jakob, so design for corporations today is the challenge is to open up for art and poetry, to get to the poetic. Did I get it right? That's what you're trying to do, smuggle in the poetics.
Well, I think that I wouldn't say that that's the I mean, we're trying to use poetry and art to make things just sing, but on a more fundamental level, what we're doing, what I'm working very much with now is to make everyone that we work with to understand that everything is basically equations, and like, you know, taking the starting point of the oldest equation that exists on the planet, which are the ecosystems, and all our activities, if we're looking at them as a part of an equation, then I think that actually there are very many definitions of sustainability. To me, it's just the most elegant equations. It's the equations that doesn't leave any rest products. The equation like what we have with the ecosystems, right? Where everything is taken care of, everything becomes part of another system, and the problem with that we have today with sustainability is that companies have operated without taking the full equation into account. So we haven't taken the equation of our survival, for example, into account, because we can be nice to each other and say that we didn't understand the impact that we had. And certainly the planet is big, so I can understand that individual operators felt that way. But now the proof is very clear there. And I think that that's when we need to use, for me, it works very well because the companies that we're working with are very, like, when you hear the word equation, it's like, oh, now someone is talking my language. Because in a sense, I mean, I could say that I don't care about trees or animals or children or whatever it is. I care about equations, and the equations doesn't work if you don't take care of the trees and children and etc. So there's a way that is very practical to look at it, that you can sort of override the resistance to, like, tree huggers or whatever. And by the way, hugging a tree is wonderful if you haven't done it, but that's not the point.
I hijack the conversation. When I teach sometimes here and elsewhere, I find that it's also helpful to bring in another of the projects that you are working on, and I am working on, and you are as well, the inner development goals. I think that's also a way of framing the development that is needed from all of us human beings in order to have a slight chance to reach the goals behind us. Yeah. And I think the art there, for me, that's a very, like, it's a way to frame it to why I bring in the art. So can you tell a little bit about that, or maybe very, very briefly show it? I'm not sure everyone is familiar here with the whole project.
These are my slides. And Very quickly, we did those 17 symbols, and then there wasn't enough action, so we were thinking, oh, wait a minute, the 169 targets, that's actually the instructions. So we did a system for that also, so people could understand that. And then we were just sitting there, and there's still no action. And then we had a meeting with a lot of people who were working with mental well-being. And we said, wait a minute, who's driving this whole thing? It's us. Shouldn't there be some goals for us? So a group of people got together, and initially it was 29K and the new division, my company, and Ekshärad. And we just did a survey, what capacities and skills do we need to fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals? And we got loads of answers, about 1,000 people. We got about 2,000 answers, about half of them were usable. And then we had some researchers who started to sort them and figuring out them into categories. And then we came in as the people who are like looking at the communication from the outside and figure out how we can talk about it in a way that people understand. So there are 23 skills in 5 categories. And the first one is being, and it's about ourselves. And so we have things like inner compass, integrity, authenticity, openness and learning mindset. And obviously openness and learning mindset in many ways should be the like super skill of everything, because otherwise you can stop everything else you want to do. Self-awareness, who am I in a group, and presence, being here. So when we are thinking about who we are ourselves, and you can find all of this information online. So I know they're small. I thought they would be bigger. I was like, I'm going to be standing like a salesperson here with big sign. And then once we have like, what's our core, then the next thing we felt was pretty logical, our thoughts. So the next category is thinking, where we have obviously critical thinking and complexity awareness, which is so critical right now. Perspective skills, sense making. Sense making is very much what we're working with. Skills in seeing patterns, structuring the unknown, and being able to consciously create stories. So they're very easy to grasp. Long-term orientation and visioning. We haven't been doing that great on that. And then when we have ourselves and our thoughts, then how do we relate to the world around us, which is the third category, relating. And there we have things like appreciation, connectedness, humility, empathy, and compassion. It's really like, how do we make a connection with the world around us? And once we've done that, how do we create things together? So that's collaborating, where we need communication skills, co-creation skills. We need an inclusive mindset and intercultural competence. We need trust. That's also a super skill to me. And mobilization skills. And finally, then when we collaborate, so how do we really get some action? How do we push this agenda forward? So acting is done with courage, creativity, optimism, and perseverance. So in a developmentgoals.org, you have all of this thing. We're developing the visual language. It started like a list. You saw that we had little like icons in the corners, which are in some way going to be illustrative of a visual system, so we can easily refer to these and keep them in mind. So, and I'm using these like every day, all the time. Like when I'm writing an email, a proposal, when I'm just like eyeing through them, and do I have all of these skills? And the one thing that I'd like to point out, since we're talking about very philosophical things here, is that I'm looking at these as atoms that you build things with, and the irony of it is that creativity is a molecule, obviously, because you can't have creativity without so many, without being able to have complexity awareness and humility and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very interesting system to work with, and you can build things and you can have a challenge, and you can find which of these skills do I need to best approach this, because even if we wanted, we can't have all skills.
But this, Jakob, thank you very much for this very nice way of presenting it too. And isn't it a sort of introduction to a kind of philosophical approach to the? How do you react when you see these, or have a look at them again and just comment them from your point of view?
So could you just recap the setting for this? when these were the.
Well, I mean, the idea was just how do we push the sustainable development goals forward, and you know, I've done presentations when I've said that, okay, we have the rules, we have the plan. I've showed a picture of a football playing field, and we have the rules, but who are the actors? How do they behave? And this is how we need to behave to push this change forward.
Yeah, I would just spontaneously read it as becoming examples, or exemplifying as like not so the difference between like an example and an illustration. So I think that the design processes that you're describing and working with would be also put in the agenda, like as an exemplifying how it can be understood in its graphical shape. It's not an illustration of it, in that sense that an illustration would be then a general, a particular example, like where the general is completely clear, and this is the particular instantiation of that general fact, kind of, while the example is actually where the example is actually the general fact being general in its particular in its particularity as something graspable at all. So like conveying this kind of enormously abstract and just this pressure on agents to act on, or like to act to react to and to change with.
I think this is this art as illustration or example also is very, very quite important. Emma, you're sort of.
No, I want to hear if there are other questions.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking about a question for a while. I'm Prasad Pradhan from Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. Since we are in a business school, one of the reputed one thing came in my mind, because sustainable business is really crucial for sustainability, and that also holds for sustainable production. But how the business can also move towards for sustainable consumption, because marketing, business are all about consuming more, promoting consumerisms. But how can we go these consumerisms towards more like consuming less is good? Thank you.
Let me just have a small comment on that. We have a course here on art, but it's called Art and Luxury. And luxury is something you cannot consume because it's too expensive. So you have to be very restrained. This is just a comment, yeah.
Well, Yeah, my answer to that is this is a business school. It's a social scientific university, and it's a place of higher education and academic thought. And I think it's the best way of going about that is, in my mind, we have the educational mission that we abbreviate FREE, right? Jakob is speaking about the inner development goals that are quite similar actually in terms of content. But I believe that if you are fact-based, if you are reflective, if you are empathetic and culturally literate, and if you are action-oriented or entrepreneurial and responsible, it's something that you can actually through the help of course fact-based knowledge and all these different types of other pedagogical tools. I think it's something that you create inside individuals and in the interaction between them, in the communities that are actually built, and something that has to come from the outside. You can't teach anybody ethics, I believe. You actually, I don't think you can do that by telling them this is what you do, but it has to come from the inside. So by giving them examples, exposing them to sort of unsustainable solutions, and see, is this something that the world needs? And obviously, I think if you teach this in a good way, it's something that will develop over time within the communities and within the persons themselves.
I think is that okay? Yeah, oh, sorry.
My name is Volker Moffer, Mid-Sweden University. I'd like follow up on Prabhan's question actually, and distinguish between increasing profits and increasing the throughput of resources and energy. Yeah, so growth is in both. Profits is just the economical number. Increasing throughput of resources and energy is really the thing which harms the world. Yeah, and our business is good, or became already good in selling smaller products with less energy are used, so with less resources used at a higher price. Yeah, so you increase the profit, but you sell actually less. Yeah, of course you try still to sell perhaps more of the products, and you have then rebound effects. Yeah, so you have here also an issue in there. But how could art help to increase this kind of thinking? That yeah, and actually it helps also. Some cars are very nice designed. They're smaller than the usual cars, but they're sold at higher prices. So there some sort of art comes in, yeah, the design of art. But how could art elsewhere help to change this kind of thinking and yeah, perhaps help to less resource consumption and energy consumption? Thank you.
You go ahead. I should have.
I don't know. I guess also have that hope, but I think that it's been the artworks that have started the conversations. We had a fantastic piece of art standing outside the building, and the students, and it was showing a paperless homeless person living in Stockholm, and the students became very engaged, which in itself was interesting. They really started to get into discussions. How can that happen? How is society built? And then we paired it with the researchers here that will work on income inequalities and things, the economic system as such. And that in itself, to me, that was like, it's the itching powder, and it at least it brings those topics into the discussion at the business school. And it makes, not everybody, absolutely not, but some students will find alternative ways to go ahead. And I don't know, it brings me hope, and the art helps in that.
And I don't think you can ever say that there is a strict causality between using art and then creating some kind of increased, solving the energy issues and all these sustainability problems that we're facing. But again, it's something that opens up. It's sort of it creates some kind of other ways of opening up people's minds, and thereby opening up different types of communities. So I think we should never see it as completely. There's no causality that is direct and very hard to measure as well.
So thank you a lot for coming here this morning. Thanks a lot to the panel. It's now coffee time, and then you will wander out in this school which is a small school. It's a grande école, but it's a small school. And classroom after classroom is sort of transformed into something which may hopefully open up to thinking in the teaching situation and so on. But you will see that, and we're very happy that you're here. And thanks a lot, philosophers, designers, researchers, teachers, and human beings to come here. Thank you.
And as some of you already have heard, but I would like to recuperate that here as well. As small, Jakob and Anna, just as Anna and Emma and Jakob and Lars, as a small token of appreciation from ISDRS, we are planting 10 trees for you each, for One Tree Planet, and just as a token of appreciation. It has been a fantastic addition and a start of the day 3 of our conference. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.